CTBK is more than just a full-service accounting firm. They are one team with an innovative approach that takes on each new challenge with collaborative problem-solving skills to provide creative solutions for their clients. Based right here in Western New York, CTBK is a champion for your business in our community. Additionally, CTBK goes beyond tax and attest services by offering a wide array of consulting and outsourced solutions tailored to meet the unique needs of your business, allowing you to focus on your operational and long-term strategic goals. Whether you're a large corporation, a small business, or somewhere in between, the team at CTBK is determined to help you succeed. Visit ctbk.com or call 716-630-2400. 716-630-2400 to learn how CTBK's one-team approach can work for you. Welcome to another edition of Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. I'm Tim Graham of The Athletic, here with Jonah Bronstein of the New Bronstein Times. And here's Ed McGrogan from tennis.com. And what that means is Tennis Magazine, Tennis Channel, pretty much everything tennis. Ed McGrogan is involved in it, overseeing it perhaps. Overlord at tennis.com, because he's the senior editorial manager and he's a huge Bills fan. So what better time than to have Ed on while we're in the midst of Wimbledon? Jessie Pegula has reached the quarterfinals and we're just a few weeks away from training camp starting. So Ed is all in a lather and we've decided to have him on. No, not in a lather. I got a little eye roll with that.
It's great to be one of the friends, finally, Tim. We've been talking about this for a while, but yeah, I mean, look, would this not be one of Western New York's biggest achievements from an athletic perspective? Note to readers, we're recording on Monday, but yeah, she's at the point now where she's reached the quarterfinals for the fifth time in the last 7 slams, and she's come up short every single time at this juncture. Something of another parallel to another Buffalo standby that we all know. So it's interesting where she's at with this, and I've talked to her a few times. We can go over all that, but definitely an interesting player, and we've kind of arrived at another big moment for her.
So she's ranked number 4 in the world, I believe, heading into Wimbledon. She had been number 3 as of a few weeks ago. But help us out here. For the casual tennis fan, I'll see if you can break it down for us. That she is the 4th ranked player by the WTA. Does that mean she's the 4th best player in the world?
So I do think that's correct. And it's interesting you say that, because a couple of weeks ago, she was in number 3. But I think she was put in that top 3 distinction purely by the numbers and not by the eye test, because as I alluded to with where she's kind of hit her ceiling at the slams, there seems to be a strata of the women's game where there's a big 3, so to speak. I'm not going to compare them to Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, but there is a group of 3 women, Iga Swiatek, Aryna Sabalenka, Elena Rybakina, who have separated themselves from the tour. They've won the past 4 majors, I believe. But to Pegula's credit, she's matched their ranking point total with just consistency across the board, deep runs across the board. So she was in that position. But I think most in the tennis world, see her as that level below, just unable for, a variety of reasons, the lack of which is probably just that pure, undeniable weapon that kind of separates all great tennis players from the others, that she just hasn't been able to bear against them. So, but yeah, she's number 4. I think that's accurate where she is. And she kind of has the opportunity to write that, to prove people right or prove people wrong where she is. At number 4, she's the highest ranked American in men's or women's tennis, and has been for a good 6-7 months now. And I should add that she's also ranked top 3 in doubles as well. And she plays with Coco Gauff most commonly, who, has transcended the game from the casual fan. And I think Pegula's, I think part of this is that Pegula is certainly known in the tennis world. And it remains to be seen if she can also break through beyond, not only in that space because of her performance, but also to perhaps step out of the shadow of the obvious connection to the Bills, Terry and Kim, etc. But she's a player. She's a late bloomer, I would say. She's still under 30. Really hit her stride about 2 years ago, where it just kind of all clicked post pandemic. Very flat hitting game, and when she's on, very tough to beat on any surface. That you hit the ball hard with no margin over the net. I don't care if you're playing on slow or fast, it's going to work. But it's just she's kind of run into this wall, I would say. She's acknowledged that. And I think this is another one of those compelling moments for a player that I think there's more to the surface in, based on what I kind of have talked to her about, just kind of some of the things I've described briefly. But it's an interesting time for her. And this is a tournament, Wimbledon, where I did think going in that the shine on her is kind of dimmed a little bit after a subpar French Open, and the spotlight's off her here. It's on some of those aforementioned players, and I thought this could be an event where if it all clicks, could go far. She got a great draw, and to this point has done very well. So I think that's a bit of a table setter where we are now, but we could certainly go anywhere else with that too.
She's won these past 3 matches in straight sets by, pretty comfortable margins after a hard-fought first match. What do you think about the way she's playing, and does that signal a breakthrough in the quarterfinal round coming up?
Yeah, she's played very well. I think anytime, anybody who has, I think, aspirations of going really deep at these events, you do want to avoid those, marathons in the early rounds. It's more pronounced on the men's side, where you can perhaps play up to 5 sets early on, but still advance. Women's, it's a bit more manageable with 3 as your max output. In the opening round, she played a fellow American by the name of Lauren Davis. Very good grass court player, as it turns out. Again, at Wimbledon, the big difference, and this kind of ties to everything I'm going to talk about here, is the ball will stay low. You're just not going to get the bounce you are on a hard court or even on clay. So being low to the ground, hitting low to the ground is really something that's the secret sauce, I feel like, of this. And Pegula was able to outmaneuver Davis in 3 sets, and from there has really just been comfortable. She no question has had a great draw. She has not been tasked with overcoming, a dark horse mid-seed player, for example, or hasn't run into someone who was woefully underseeded because of injury, and just, you get kind of an unfortunate break in the draw. And even in her next match on Tuesday, it's against a player that she's never played before, Marketa Vondrousova, but who hasn't had great success at Wimbledon either. But she is a former Olympic singles medalist and a former French Open finalist, so will be the toughest player she's faced thus far. But her form is really strong right now. I think in these surfaces where we're out at Wimbledon, you don't have a lot of time to work your way into the grass. There's only 3 weeks in between the clay and the grass. You don't have a lot of time to figure it out, so to speak. And she's done it quickly. And I think part of that is playing that doubles alongside. You just get more reps, even though it's not the most pressure-filled match competition. Any player, I think, would say that. That does help her, and I think that's part of the story too.
She is 0-5 all-time in Grand Slam quarterfinals. If she's able to pull this off and advance to the semifinals, how big of a feat is that for her, given, as you say, late bloomer? I think that a few years ago, the fans around Western New York, or people who are paying attention to the Pegulas as a family, and because her mom and dad owned the Bills and the Sabres and the Bandits and the Amerks, et cetera, had this thought of, well, she's a professional tennis player. But they didn't ever think Grand Slam titles or super successful. They just maybe thought of her as somebody who happens to play tennis for a living, which is a very small percentage, and that's great for her. But here we are talking about single digits in the world rankings, up to number 3 recently, here maybe inching into the semifinal. But I guess, what does that mean as a career maker? I mean, nobody talks about all the times they reach the semifinals. When you talk about the great tennis players, it's not how many times they reach the semis. But what does this say about where she is in terms of her career, her age, and this as potentially the biggest accomplishment so far, and how much time is left to go further?
Yeah. So I think personally for her, it's a big step. I will get to what you said elsewhere in a second, but when I talked to her in Charleston before a tournament there back in April, I sort of asked her the same question you did in a roundabout way, was, you've gone deep everywhere. There's been clearly a bit of a glass ceiling. How does that make you feel? Like, where kind of are you? What's your space on this? And, she put it pretty bluntly to me that, the time needs to be now to accomplish these things. She's putting herself in position to do so. She's probably doing so at a time where the game is in a bit of transition. You're post Serena Williams, you're post Ash Barty for some of your tennis fans out there. You're post some big players that have just bowed out or retired. Naomi Osaka is another one that's not a presence in the game right now. So for her personally, getting past that point is significant. No question about it. I think if you're talking about where does this enter the public sphere, this is another part of, she's a person of interest in Western New York for obvious reasons. She's a person of interest outside of Western New York for, I think, reasons that don't pertain necessarily to the intimate connection we have with the Bills, but that she's this player who seemingly is bankrolled by this unlimited fund of capital. That's something that she's asked about everywhere she goes, deals with, I think, pretty admirably. Just, you still kind of have to put in the work yourself, obviously, to do this. But I think where this story could potentially really pick up its legs is, yeah, if she gets to the semifinal tomorrow, it's a big step. Again, she's not playing a player who anybody outside of a serious tennis fan would know to a great deal. Now, let's say this goes on, you get to a Wimbledon final. She would have to be most likely a pretty serious player before that, likely the world number 1, Swiatek. That's when the media machine, the hype really starts, and I think you really start hearing about this more. It wouldn't be as if she would reach a slam final at the Australian Open, something like that, where it's a little bit off the radar. Wimbledon is, of course, so much more significant. So I think that, we talk about her top 3 ranking. I think you just put it about, no one really remembers like a semifinalist, for example, or a straight, deep run. Like number 3 in the world, yes, you don't need me to tell you, it's incredible to even comprehend that. But if she does pair this with a title, a final at Wimbledon, I think that's where maybe this whole career story of hers kind of blooms in a different way. And I think she would relish it. I gotta think she's a bit tired of hearing about the family finances, the bill stuff. She's always been very cordial to me about it and has never dismissed it, but she also has, I think, a desire to kind of strike it out on her own as well. And I think that's part of the motivation of this. And I think that's part of why I'm interested in her a bit, not only as a player, but just as a person too.
Being that she's 29 years old, which is a prime age for athletes in many, many sports. But what about in this sport, in women's tennis, where players kind of reach their primes much earlier? Where is she in terms of her window of whether she needs to win now or later?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is, there might be a little urgency to this. I don't think it's like if you don't get it done this year, you're in trouble because you're over 30. I think the game has, generally speaking, grown older on both the men's and women's tours. I think it's just players train in different ways. They do not, you see less and less prodigies in the game as you did back in the 70s, 80s. Like you really don't see Coco Gauff, for example, I think is the exception now, whereas you were seeing Jennifer Capriati, Monica Seles, Steffi Graf, players like of that historical ilk who were starting their careers as 15 and 16-year-olds. So I think the game has grown a bit older. On the women's side, especially, you have to consider that a lot of, there's many players want to have families, for example. There's an inherent thing that just doesn't, that the ATP does not have to concern itself with it the most, just because of the reality. So I think there's a good window here of about, let's say, another 2 to 3 years. I want to say if I'm going to earmark something as kind of that prime window. Like I said, I think the game is in a bit of transition. I think there's a bit of shifting of where things are, but I think she's also just playing the best she has. She's had the confidence, and I think to her credit, you look at her stats, you would never think a player with her ranking accomplishment would have only 2 singles titles to her name. It's bizarre, honestly. You can look at the top 20 of the WTA rankings, and you could go further than that, and you'll find players that have more than 2 titles. And she's only won 1 title at all since the summer of 2019. So it's a very bizarre sort of case where I think the talent is there, the drive is there, but I don't know if it's a more of a mental thing, or if it's more just she's just ran into, like, she's kind of extracted everything she can to this point. I think that's, again, why I'm interested in where this goes, because maybe the fact of the matter is that she is at this point, and the talent is just there to get to number 4 in the world, and that's probably all you can do. But tennis is obviously a huge matchup game, the any given day cliche, all that. So urgency, I think there is definitely some, but I also think she's got a bit of a window here too for those reasons.
Ed, you alluded to it, I think. I mean, not even I think, but you didn't really get into the topic, I guess, is what I'm saying, or as I'm about to say. When you wrote your feature for tennis.com about Jessie Pegula back in April, about maybe the potential of her taking over the family business, or certainly getting very involved in it. And Terry Pegula, because of his age, and unfortunately with Kim Pegula's health issues, if they want to keep this in the family, which Terry Pegula has always said he does, that we may be looking, as we watch Jessie Pegula play at Wimbledon, the future owner of the Bills and the Sabres, which is kind of a interesting element too, as you watch. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? As she's obviously putting in the work, from all accounts, she does a lot of stuff behind the scenes, business wise. She's really savvy. She has this relentless work ethic that you wrote about in your feature regarding how she plays all the time. She plays every tournament. And it's not only every tournament, but she's doing singles, doubles, mixed doubles. So there's all kinds of things to admire, or if you wanted to point at nepotism as the Pegulas and roll your eyes and think, as a Bills or a Sabres fan, oh my God, what's going to happen when the kids take over? It seems as though what we're seeing out of Jessica Pegula as a player is pretty remarkable in terms of what we may project as the future owner of the Bills/Sabres.
I mean,
what are your thoughts as a Bills fan and somebody who's been around Jessie Pegula?
I mean, look, I found it interesting that she was the one to reveal everything about Kim in January. I think, that statement, it was more than a statement, that those that message could have come from anybody in the family, a collective in the family, a representative. So when that broke, right after the season and while she was down in Australia, I was surprised by that. I hadn't talked to her in the depth that I have this year before that came out, but I do think that does, it could clue you into thinking like, if she's taking that much of a forward-facing stake in the family and everything that comes with that, I mean, yeah, there is absolutely a potential for that. She's done some entrepreneurial work of her own. She's, like you said, she's on the WTA board. She's been outspoken a few times this year about there was a huge kerfuffle over after a tournament where the women's doubles players were not given the mic to speak after their final, but the men's were, and she didn't mince words about that, and really hasn't. Like, she could, given her status, sort of drift away from the spotlight, excuse me, and not take on, what arrows may come at her and that additional lens on her. But she has been, I think, very willing to be in that position. I think at some point when we were talking about Kim and that whole message was, yeah, like she said to me, like, yeah, for a while I was wondering, like, is this where I have to stop playing and be a part of this? So I think I'd be surprised if that hasn't entered her mind at various points, because, like you said, the reality is this does have to flow down at a certain point or another. So I don't think it's out of the question at all that could be the future of this. And I think for a professional athlete who's done things on the global stage, and wouldn't be sort of cowed by the spotlight, you're kind of growing up with a incredible line item on your resume to be one of the future faces of the franchises, so to speak. So it wouldn't surprise me, really. And I think for all the reasons we've talked about, the work ethic, the sort of desire for it, I think that's completely plausible.
It should also be mentioned that Jessie's husband, Taylor Gahagan, is the director of corporate development with the Bills, and or I guess I should say that's with Pegula Sports and Entertainment, which is the umbrella company that has the Bills and the Sabres underneath it. And also Kelly Pegula has been learning the ropes, and Matthew Pegula studied sports business. I don't remember the major exactly, but he's a graduate of Syracuse University, and he's been studying earnestly to be in the family business. So, I mean, theoretically, I don't know. I don't have his transcripts, but they are at least they seem to be taking hold. Again, what do we know? What do we really know? Because we see it in professional sports all the time. You take a look at the front office directory of most teams, and you see a lot of people with the same last name as the owner working in key positions within the front office and in the directory.
Well, if I could say, I think one thing we don't know, but I think we could maybe say with some confidence, in contrast to Ralph Wilson's family, I don't think there's ever been any indication that the Pegula children do not want to inherit the franchises, or at least maybe it's too early to speculate on that. But I think you can't rule that out. But that was made very clear by Ralph Wilson's estate that wouldn't happen, and it really hasn't been insinuated in this case.
That's 100% true, Jonah. I will say, though, I don't know that they have the appetite or the love of hockey that their father does. But by and large, this is the family business, and they are very excited to keep at it. There was just no interest. Well, It was always told to me that if Ralph Wilson had a son, that he wouldn't have sold the team. The Bills would have gone to Ralph Wilson's son, but he did not have a son. And therefore Ralph, in his old school ways, wasn't sure that women should be running a sports team. And so it was going to be put up for sale, and whether anybody wanted it or not, within the family. Good old Ralph.
Can I say something that he had mentioned earlier?
Yeah.
Well, he had just referenced if Jessie Pegula were to win Wimbledon or a Grand Slam, how much of an accomplishment that could be for Buffalo sports. And I kind of wanted his take and expansion on that, because I wonder about that on the other side. You know, she was born here but didn't live here for very long, moved down to South Carolina, then Florida, doesn't come back here much in off seasons, at least, to live here. And this sport doesn't allow for like a home event in Buffalo to give her that kind of hometown celebration curtain call. But from your perspective, covering the tour, covering the Grand Slams, I mean, and being a Bills fan, what do you think about this as a Buffalo sporting accomplishment?
Yeah, it's a good point. She's really based in Florida. Even spent a lot of time in South Carolina as well. And yeah, almost has the Bills or the Buffalo NY really attached in you know, just for that sense. But I do think though that you know, maybe part of it is because the city is obviously so starved for something. It would be, I think it would be viewed I think it would certainly be viewed nationally as a Buffalo success story. I think, and again, comparing it to what there has not been in the achievement field, if we're talking about purely championships, I think it would have to rate as pretty damn high on the list. I mean, Wimbledon champion is, in terms of sports achievements go, there aren't that many higher than that, especially in an individual setting too. So, you know, I think about that. I've talked to, you know, Jimmy Arias, another local from Grand Island. You know, I think when I've chatted with him, certainly he kind of includes Pegula in that hometown nest, if you will, of athletes. And I think certainly you can nitpick a bit on like how much Buffalo perhaps she is in a way. But at the same time, look, she is definitely a big advocate for the area, even if she's a globetrotter and is obviously based in warmer climes because of her job. I think she's very authentic with that personally. I don't get a sense of why she isn't, from my conversations and seeing her interactions. So I think it would be substantial. And I think I'm curious to see what the town itself, how that would play there. Like, I'm not in Buffalo. But I would be curious, like Wimbledon Saturday, like are we going to bars? Are we going to Elmo's to watch this? Like, I'm curious about that. Like, what would that vibe be? Or am I really overthinking it?
No, I think it's a good question.
I think there would be some watch parties.
Yeah.
The early morning starts, I think, factors into that a little bit with Wimbledon. But yeah, I'm curious about that because I don't think that's happened yet. But if she gets to the semifinals or the finals, I do think you might see a lot of local watch parties and capturing the imagination of local sports fans that way.
What day of the week is the women's final?
Be Saturday, 9 a.m. Eastern.
Well, some places are, if you want to go to a bar and watch it, I guess you got to hit up the bars where people watch their soccer.
Yep.
You got to get there early.
Yep. Yeah. But I think go ahead, Tim.
Oh, no. We'll go ahead and finish because I want to flip over to the Bills so we can get all our Jessie Pegula talk out now before we start talking about your passion project, Ed.
Go for it, Jonah.
No, I just want to say, I mean, there's bars on Pegula properties. So I would think that would be a natural fit for if there were to be an event like this. And I think there should be, or maybe even the arena itself, because I think the one thing maybe missing from this is the ability for local Buffalo sports fans to gather together and cheer Jessie Pegula on. And I don't think there's any way for the sport to come here and have a live event to allow for that. So it would have to be a televised watch party type situation.
Should there be a parade if she wins?
Sure.
I mean, go right after the Bisons to Pegula and you go from there. I mean, yeah, it's true. Tennis is very select where it goes. But yeah, I mean, you're right. The missing link of this, Joe, I think you made a good point there, is like, yeah, there's all the Bills Mafia stuff that associated with her. Like, you get an actual tailgate for a tennis match, and then I think it really we'll see. I mean, look, if anybody can do it, I know my people can. So that's maybe a good segue.
That would be it may be people listening to this, although I don't know it would be as much of a groundswell, but maybe it would be the first domino. But I'll plant the seed of, if Buffalo truly wants to establish itself as the best sports town in the world, with its fan zealotry and its tailgating prowess, then tailgating for a 9 a.m. tennis match and having a big, I think that would be a badge of honor. And it's the type of thing that Buffalo fans would show up for too. Maybe there's a little pandering involved, but if you truly are a Buffalo sports fan, you better tailgate. You should be jumping through tables, doing all the things. And watching Jessie Pegula at the Wimbledon final.
You said it. I think it's clear as day.
Ed, you've mentioned it as to me as we've communicated in DMs and texts that you do have a passion project that you've been working on. And I don't know if you want to get into it too much here for free. Here on Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants, about the all-time, well, not the all-time, I'm sorry, but the best McDermott Allen era wins and losses, the best wins and the worst losses. You've been given this a lot of thought, and I know that this is your baby.
Yeah, so I mean, I think
Tennis.com
just won't take it. They won't print this.
I mean, budgets these days. We don't
they don't want to post Bills content at tennis.com.
I think there's a lot of Bills adjacent content already coming through this Pegula. But yeah, so I mean, I think we're at a bit of a fork in the road as well for the Bills this year. As you know, I'm a card carrying fan. I'm not shy about that. So, but one thing I was thinking about batting around is just, I watch every game, all that stuff. And I just thinking back to this Allen era that we're in, there's been some, incredible wins, some real face plants over these past few years too, where the team has obviously evolved from where it was when I started following the team in early 2000s. Went to school in Geneseo, and that's where I picked him up. And from there, settled through the crud drought era. So, really fun times there. And then we're kind of, now we're where everybody else is, in a bit more high society. So, but I've looked back at the past 4 years in particular and assessed what I deem to be, and not the best wins and the worst losses of each of those years. And I think the challenge for like a written piece is like, can you just pick one? Can you pick one or two of each? And I think part of why I enjoy doing this is there's obviously a personal element to it. I have no problem making a bias if I've been to the game, for example, or if I felt like it just kind of hit more or less for whatever reason. But kind of like there's I think just been a lot to chew on. And before 2023, we're kind of looking to do something with this wherever, open for business, obviously, as Tim has so eloquently put it. But yeah, kind of noodling around like the best wins and the worst losses of 2019 through 2022.
Okay, so we have a lot of local journalists also listen to this podcast, or at least they tell me they do. They might be lying right to my face. But there are folks out there who have websites. Maybe they would like to post Ed McGrogan's top wins, worst losses. Now, of course, 13 seconds is the worst.
13
What case
seconds.
can you make for number 2?
All right, so if we go, so I break this down by year. So I segment each section, but I do want to, we can definitely look at it in totality here. So to me, excuse me, the worst, if we go after 13 seconds, I think a case could be made for the Houston playoff game, even though we're not in this, even though we're not into the real step up era of Allen as a player. I want to throw out also some nice contenders too. I personally believe the Vikings loss last year was more damaging from a emotional and every other point of view than the Bengals loss last year. I think I should add I saw both of those in person, even though I'm about 6 hours away from Buffalo. But I think that Minnesota loss is perhaps the Billsiest of this time. It really is a nice callback to the prior eras. I also want to throw out. I don't want to forget the win game. I think that I think that gets slept on a bit because, in my opinion, they got one of their best wins. And I'm not even going to say the Pats playoff game. I think the away game at New England to essentially really save that season. I think that's actually one of the best wins of these 4 years. So I think that win game, though, in terms of damaging losses, just something I will never truly be able to wipe away as well. And just one more bad loss to throw out there if we're going to, toss around the ball of defeat here. You cannot forget the Arizona Hail Mary game in 2020. There was, for that year when I'm assessing it, there's only 4 losses to choose from. But that one to me is also for, Rip taking the ball right away, the Charlie Brown meme. That's almost it's kind of a regular season version of 13 seconds in a way, where you have this Allen drive to Diggs, I think about 45 seconds left in the game to go ahead on the road. This year, this 2020 season, where I think a lot of fans pinned their hopes on the evolution of this quarterback and this team, and it was all being realized, and then in one fell swoop, just some classic stuff there. But yeah, there's some, like I said, for all they have accomplished, there are some real face plants over these past few years.
I think you got to throw in that Jaguars loss a couple of years back when they were the worst team in the league, and none of the Bills didn't score a touchdown that game or something like that. But I was wondering your take on, and this can apply to Jessie Pegula as well, losing and how that, might build character and resolve. And sometimes teams need to lose in the playoffs before they can go on and win the championship. I mean, do you see any of that going on with the Bills? And is that maybe in play for Jessie Pegula breaking through here in the quarterfinals at Wimbledon?
I mean, as the Bills go, I certainly hope so. They've done a lot of it, not just historically, but in recent years to hopefully you do get build up those calluses to make something a bit stronger. I do hope. But yeah, I think there's an absolute comparison to Jessie Pegula stuff as well here. I think again, it's there is that viewpoint upon losses is they can build character. The other side to me is they can compound and just grow more damaging over time, and that's like It's my worry as a Bills fan. Like, I feel like there's a finite time where we're at right now. To me, I don't love the term window with it, but I do know that there, at least in my opinion, that there's only a limited amount of time to get this right. Um, for Jessie Pegula, look, I think I think it's a little bit easier for her because she is so excuse me, she has so many more opportunities in such quick fashion to perhaps right or wrong. I mean, she's going to play 4 Grand Slams a year. If she won any one of them, she would be considered an unmitigated star success story in herself and for U.S. tennis. The Bills obviously have, you have one chance a year to do that. So I think that's part of like the worry as a fan of the team, but also such a difference between football and tennis too. It's just the opportunities you are given to reset all the time on the tennis court kind of is unparalleled and compared to any other sport.
Ed, how do you look back on 2022 and the way that it ended? I think a lot of fans view it as a colossal failure because the Bills were Super Bowl favorites and Josh Allen was the MVP favorite deep into the season before his elbow injury. With everything that happened with the snowstorms and DeMar Hamlin, there's two ways to look at it. There is that it was a colossal failure, or as I look at it, one of the greatest seasons in Bills history. As time goes on, I think people look back on it as pretty miraculous, everything that they went through. Where are you?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll sort of put a bow on this project by making a point about what you just said there. When I was looking at the 2022 season, I looked at like what's the best win of this season because I think right now it's known for its losses. It's that Vikings loss, it's that Bengals loss, you name it. But I thought as a fan, the best win was week 1. And I said that because I came into that season thinking, Jesus Christ, we're here. Like they're opening the season on national TV. Like this does not happen to this team. There was enough good vibes coming despite the 13 seconds, in my opinion, at least. And to me, I look at the season as I still have a hard time looking at a team that lost 3 games in the regular season by 3 points or less and how you can view that as an indictment on the team. It's just they should not have won for all the reasons kind of you mentioned in the story you did on this and what you're saying now. There's almost no way this team should have been 13-3 going into the playoffs. This was a resilient team here. I don't think any of them had even close to their best years in terms of individually, but as a unit, it still seemed to come together. And I do take them at their word for saying, "Look, I think that this engine just ran out at the end." That in retrospect, that Dolphins playoff game was such a red flag that I don't think fans like myself or others would wanted to admit at the time, but there's no way that this team barely scrapes by a third stringer at home and blows a 17-0 lead without that being a huge alarm that should be sounding off. So to me as a fan, this might be contrary to what you're saying as a reporter journalist on the team specifically. Like I have a hard time picturing it as one of the greatest accomplishments, but I also have it as more of a success than a failure. I think that's where I stand on it at the moment. And I think if this team actually does achieve what it sets out to, wins a Super Bowl at some point down the road, that this 2022 does get painted in a lot more rose-colored lens. It becomes pretty much the part of the highlight package that accompanies everything as this necessary wound that they had to come over. I mean, I may be talking, crazy there, but I do think it's more success than failure, but still just a real, tough to swallow. Still is, honestly.
You can almost hear the voiceover on NFL films as they get started on the 2023 season and how great it was if they were to win it all, because of where they came from and how the season ended and all the things they learned and the pain that was overcome, or the pain that was necessary to get them. They had to learn how to lose and suffer all kinds of things.
But to Ed's original premise, that was supposed to be 13 seconds. That was the villain origin story that created a Bills championship season. And even going back to the year before, losing in the AFC Championship game, and Stephon Diggs standing on the field watching the Chiefs celebrate. That was supposed to be the loss that propelled the Bills to something greater. So I don't know how many times you can keep, losing before it starts accumulating, stack up.
What's your general mood about 2023, Ed?
Mood's pretty good. I do like sort of this clean slate offense that at least has been, discussed, theorized. It's really the first, I think, move away from this, kind of the offense of the past 3 years and even dating back a little bit before that. But I don't mind that sort of turnover on the offense. And I think, look, I think the offense to me with that is there's probably some growing pains with it, but I'm comfortable with it. I do, and defense is not going to win. Defense is not, to me, going to be the determinant factor, but so much of this does obviously hinge on a lot of health concerns. I mean, let's see what happens with Hyde and Poyer. Let's see what happens with Von Miller, obviously. I think that's a big part of it. And I think one of my worries is, are we, as much as I think turning over the offense is probably a nice and necessary jump, or are we still holding on to the defense of prior years too much? Like, is it smart to go back to that dual safety route with Hyde and Poyer? Like, I want to be right and say that sounds amazing. That would make it an even better story. But are we relying too much on too many things to go right on that side of the ball? Hope Allen obviously does great again. That should come as no surprise. But as any Bills fan would say, the tinge of pain will quickly go to some hope pretty quickly too. So I'm looking forward to the year without a doubt.
Well, Ed, thanks for doing this. It's the perfect time to do it. I'm glad that you were able to make some time, and it's been fascinating to watch Jessie Pegula's career, because as we referenced earlier in the podcast, there was a time not that long ago when it just seemed like she just happened to be a professional tennis player. And now here she is climbing the rankings at an age that generally you don't see that for the first time anyway. A splash has been made long ago when you're a professional tennis player, but she's in the quarterfinals of Wimbledon. And
we will say, I think it's a good time as any to get together. So I appreciate both you guys. A lot of fun. Go Bills.
Thanks for your insights and your thoughts on the Bills too. And let's not be a stranger. Let's keep you in the I'll spit it out. TGAF rotation, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants.
Please do. Let's do it around the U.S. Open right at the start of the year, and let's see what Pegula does from there to now.
So I did look that up. The final day of the U.S. Open is September 10th, the opening day of the NFL season, the day before the Bills play Monday Night Football in New York, New Jersey against the Jets. So that could be some kind of culminating event maybe for Bills fans if those things align.
The Pegula family.
There's your big chance, Bills Mafia. That's your tailgate moment. Pretty big parking lots out in Flushing. You could do it right where the Mets play.
That's a great tip. Ed McGrogan, senior editorial manager at tennis.com, which means Tennis Magazine and Tennis Channel 2. Thrilled to have you here with us on Tim Graham and Friends.
Thanks a lot, guys.
The financial needs of a business go beyond tax and attest services. That's why CTBK goes beyond accounting services and offers outsourced solutions through their affiliation with CFO Solutions Plus. These additional services allow clients to focus on their operational and long-term strategic goals. Trust CTBK's outsourced solutions to provide cost-effective, value-added financial services tailored to your company's needs. Call CTBK at 716-630-2400. Again, 716-630-2400. Or go to ctbk.com to learn more about CTBK's outsourced solutions.